It's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease, long-term effects. We can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. We can think about our problems and turn on those chemicals. That means then our thoughts could make us sick. So if it's possible that our thoughts could make us sick, is it possible then our thoughts could make us well? The answer is absolutely yes. Most people spend 70% of their life living in survival and living in stress. So they're always anticipating the worst case scenario based on a past experience. They're selecting the worst possible outcome and they're beginning to emotionally embrace it with fear, and they're conditioning their body into a state of fear. Do that enough times, body has a panic attack without you. You can't even predict it because it's programmed subconsciously. So then why are you this way? And they'll say, I am this way because of this event that happened to me 15 or 20 years ago. And what that means from a biological standpoint is that they haven't been able to change since that event. So then the emotions from the experience tend to give the body and the brain a rush of energy. So people become addicted to the rush of those emotions, and they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their limitation, so at least they can feel something. So now when it comes time to change, you say to the person, why are you this way? Well, every time they recall the event, they're producing the same chemistry in their brain and body as if the event is occurring, firing and wiring the same circuits and sending the same emotional signature to the body. Well, what's the relevance behind that? Well, your body is the unconscious mind. It doesn't know the difference between the experience that's creating the emotion and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone. So the body's believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 360 days a year. And so then when those emotions influence certain thoughts, and they do, and then those thoughts create the same emotions, and those same emotions influence the same thoughts. So then the hardest part about change is not making the same choices you did the day before, period. People then wait for crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis. They wait for loss, some tragedy to make up their mind to change. And my message is, why wait? And you can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or you can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration. So then how do you begin to make those changes? Well, you have to get beyond the analytical mind, because what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And that's where meditation comes in, because you can teach people through practice how to change their brainwaves, slow them down. And when they do that properly, they do enter the operating system where they can begin to make some really important changes.
Reoccur. So if you said, let me decide how I am going to act, what I'm not going to do, and you rehearsed it, the research on mental rehearsal says your brain will look like you already did it. That you'll be so present, the brain won't know the difference between what you're imagining and what is real. The brain will begin to change to look like the experience has already happened.
As you fire and wire new thoughts and condition the body into a new emotional state, if you do that enough times, it'll begin to become familiar to you. So it's so important, just like a garden. If you're planting a garden, you got to get rid of the weeds. You got to take the plants from the past year and you got to pull them out. The rocks that sift to the top that are like our emotional blocks, they have to be removed. The soil has to be tenderized and broken down. We have to make room to plant a new garden. So primarily, we learn the most about ourselves and others when we're uncomfortable. Because the moment you move into that uncomfortable state, normally a program jumps in. When that program jumps in, it's because the person doesn't want to be in the present moment and engage it consciously. So when you teach people how to do that with a meditative process, turns out that when they're in their life, they're less likely to emotionally react. They're less likely to be so rigid and believe the thoughts they were thinking. They're more aware of when they go unconscious back into a habit, and that is what starts the process of change. And so we have to unlearn before we relearn. We have to break the habit of the old self before we reinvent a new self. We have to prune synaptic connections and sprout new connections. We have to unfire and unwire and refire and rewire. We have to unmemorize emotions that are stored in the body, then recondition the body to a new mind and to a new emotion, like deprogram and reprogram. I want to take a moment and teach you some basic tools to begin to change your life. When you invest in yourself, you invest in your future. Number one, take some time out of your busy lives to disconnect from your world. Shut your cell phone off, turn the TV off,
power down your computer, sit your body down for a few minutes and close your eyes. Number 1. Number 2, take some breaths and center yourself. When you center your attention into the present moment, you have more energy to create with. When your mind wanders to the predictable future or the familiar past, that's normal. Just become aware of it. Keep working on settling yourself back down into the present moment. When you're in the present moment, you're the most creative. Number 3, ask yourself, can I be defined by a vision of the future instead of the memories of the past? What do I want in my life? And take the time to answer the question. As you begin to contemplate and think about the answer to the question, you're changing your brain. When you make your brain fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations, that's the beginning steps of changing your mind. Next, decide on the emotions you'll feel when you begin to create that future. And teach your body emotionally what that future is going to feel like. And don't get up until you begin to feel those emotions. Next step, step number 4, rehearse in your mind who you're going to be when you open your eyes, the things you have to do, the choices you have to make, the steps you have to take, and review them over and over again. Number 5, you can't go to the future holding on to the biology of your past. Decide what thoughts you can bring to your future. Write them down. Thoughts like, I can't, it's too hard, I'll never change, I'll start tomorrow, what's wrong with me, it's someone else's fault. Decide on what behaviors or actions or unconscious habits you have to change. How do you talk? Do you complain? Do you blame? Do you make excuses? Do you feel sorry for yourself? Just become so conscious of those behaviors that you'll never go unconscious again. And lastly, you have to decide what emotions no longer belong in your future. That means if you want to be wealthy, you can't take lack. If you want to be healthy, you can't take insecurity or fear. You got to begin to condition your body to a new mind. If you do this every single day, your personality creates your personal reality. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. Change any one of those things and you change your life. And begin to measure the effects of you at cause. Give it a shot.